The midnight glass. The beginning of sorrows. Once upon a time, in a distant kingdom nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, lived a young girl named Elara. She wasn't a princess, but her heart was full of grace and kindness. Elara was born into a family of wealth, but her fortune quickly turned after the untimely death of her mother. Her father, a kind-hearted merchant, tried his best to give her a loving home. However, Elara's loneliness was palpable. When Elara was 12, her father remarried a woman named Lady Vivien. Vivien had 2 daughters of her own, Clarisse and Mathilde, who, though outwardly charming, carried envy in their hearts. Elara's world, which had already been tinted with sorrow, shifted once more when her father, who had ventured on a trading journey across the seas, never returned. Left with her stepmother and stepsisters, Elara became more of a servant than a daughter. Lady Vivien, though once wealthy, had lost her fortune and married Elara's father to secure her status. But with his death, all the inheritance passed through Elara, though she saw none of it. Lady Vivien was not overtly cruel, but her disdain for Elara simmered beneath the surface, and her daughters were far less subtle. They took every opportunity to remind Elara of her new station in life. Elara, who had once danced in the gardens and sung with the birds, now toiled from dawn until dusk, scrubbing floors, mending clothes, and preparing grand feasts she could never partake in. Her hands grew calloused, her feet weary, but her spirit remained unbroken. She found solace in the small things: the sunlight streaming through a dusty window, the comforting chirps of the birds who still visited her, and the quiet companionship of the mice who scurried about the manor. Though life was hard, Elara's heart remained pure. She believed that kindness would eventually win out, and she held on to her mother's words: "Even the darkest night must end with the dawn." Dreams of the royal ball. Word soon spread across the kingdom of a grand ball to be held at the royal palace. Prince Caspian, the kingdom's heir, had reached the age where he was expected to marry, and this ball would be the beginning of his search for a bride. Every eligible young lady in the land was invited to attend, and the excitement in the air was palpable. Lady Vivien was thrilled. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. One of her daughters would marry the prince, securing their future and restoring her family's name. Clarisse and Mathilde, both vain and eager, began preparing their dresses immediately, demanding that Elara help them with their gowns, hair, and accessories. As Elara watched them, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. She too was invited. For a brief moment, she imagined herself at the ball, dancing under the soft glow of chandeliers, meeting people from all over the kingdom, and perhaps even speaking with the prince himself. But that hope was swiftly dashed when her stepmother caught wind of her dream. "Foolish girl," Lady Vivien scoffed. "You, at the royal ball? Look at you, you're nothing more than a scullery maid now. You have no dress, no jewels, no place at such an event." Elara's heart sank, but she tried to reason with herself. Perhaps her stepmother was right. After all, what would she wear? How would she get there? Still, the dream lingered, like a fragile spark waiting to be ignited. The fairy's gift. The night of the ball arrived. The manor buzzed with excitement as Clarisse and Mathilde paraded around in their elaborate gowns. Elara had outdone herself, making sure their hair was flawless, their jewels shined brightly, and their dresses fit perfectly. As the carriage whisked them away to the palace, Elara stood in the doorway, watching the last glimpse of her stepsisters disappear into the distance. A tear slipped down her cheek. Turning away, Elara made her way to the garden, the one place where she felt a semblance of peace. She knelt by a small fountain and whispered her sorrow to the stars. "I only wanted one night," she said softly. "One night to feel free to dream." Suddenly, the air around her shimmered. The garden, once quiet and dimly lit, sparkled with an otherworldly glow. Elara gasped as a soft voice echoed around her. "You deserve that night, dear child." Before her stood a woman, cloaked in shimmering silver and light. Her eyes were kind, her smile warm. "I am your fairy godmother," she said with a wink. And tonight, Elara, you shall go to the ball. Elara blinked in disbelief. But I have no dress, no carriage, no way to. The fairy godmother waved her wand with a gentle flourish, and in an instant, Elara's ragged dress transformed into a breathtaking gown of the finest silk, shimmering in shades of silver and blue. A pair of delicate glass slippers appeared on her feet, and nearby, a simple pumpkin began to grow and morph into a grand carriage. The mice who had been her companions scurried forward, and with another wave, they became elegant horses, ready to carry her to the ball. Elara's heart raced. How can I ever thank you? There's no need, the fairy godmother said softly. But remember, the magic will only last until midnight. After that, everything will return to how it was. Now go, my dear, and make the most of this night. With tears of joy in her eyes, Elara stepped into the carriage, her heart pounding with excitement. She was going to the ball, the prince and the midnight dance. The palace was even more magnificent than Elara had imagined. Golden chandeliers hung from high ceilings, casting a warm glow over the grand hall. Music filled the air as noblemen and women twirled across the floor in an endless dance of elegance and grace. As Elara entered, all eyes turned to her. She glided through the crowd, her beauty and grace captivating everyone, including Prince Caspian. He had danced with many ladies that night, but none had stirred his heart. But when he saw Elara, something inside him shifted. Without a word, he crossed the floor and took her hand. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his voice soft and kind. Elara nodded, unable to find her voice. Together, they moved in perfect harmony, as if they had been dancing together all their lives. The world around them faded, and for those precious moments, nothing else mattered. They spoke little, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. Elara felt free, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to dream of something more. But as the night wore on, she glanced at the clock. To her horror, it was nearing midnight. "I must go," she whispered, pulling away from the prince. "Wait," he called, but it was too late. Elara fled the palace, racing down the grand staircase as the clock began to chime. In her haste, one of her glass slippers slipped from her foot, but she didn't stop to retrieve it. She reached her carriage just as the final stroke of midnight sounded. The magic dissolved around her, and she found herself standing in her ragged clothes, the grand carriage now a simple pumpkin once more. But even in her return to reality, she clutched the memory of the night in her heart, knowing it would stay with her forever. The search for the glass slipper. The next morning, the kingdom was abuzz with the news. The prince had fallen in love with the mysterious lady in the glass slippers, and he was determined to find her. He sent out a decree. Every young woman in the land was to try on the slipper, for only the rightful owner could marry the prince. When the news reached Lady Vivian's household, her daughters were ecstatic. Clarice and Mathilde were convinced that one of them would be the prince's bride. Elara, however, remained quiet, her heart full of doubt. Could such a dream really come true for someone like her? The prince's search party arrived at their home, and the stepsisters eagerly tried on the slipper. But of course, it didn't fit. Just as the soldiers were about to leave, Elara stepped forward. "May I try?" she asked quietly. Lady Vivian and her daughter scoffed, but the soldier nodded. To everyone's astonishment, the slipper slid perfectly onto Elara's foot. In that moment, the prince, who had accompanied the search party, recognized her. "It was you," he said, his eyes full of wonder. Elara smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "It was me, happily ever after." Elara and the prince were married in a grand ceremony, but their love was built on more than just the magic of a single night. They understood each other in a way that few ever could, and together, they ruled the kingdom with kindness and wisdom. Lady Vivian and her daughters were forgiven, though they never lived in the palace. Elara, in her endless grace, made sure they were taken care of, though they would never regain the status they had once desired so fiercely. As for Elara, she never forgot her humble beginnings. She remained a friend to the poor, a protector of the downtrodden, and a symbol of hope to all who heard her story. And so, in the kingdom of golden hills and starlit skies, Elara and her prince lived happily ever after. Not because of a slipper, but because of a heart that remained pure, even through life's darkest moments.